Hey, I hope you're having a good time today. And let me explain to you what I believe is the difference between judging and thinking. Thinking and judging, to me, are well, it's kind of like polar opposites of one another. While judging it has a bit of thinking, but it's more like a frozen version of thinking. Because I believe at least this is how I feel. Judging is when a person think about a situation or a person, and while that person is doing that, it's always based off of what was observed currently or before to draw upon a conclusion, and that's what judging is. So judging is like it could be wrong, it could be right, who knows, right? But I believe thinking is more superior than judging because thinking is like judging, but it doesn't draw upon any conclusion. It's like it's an ongoing thing, but you're waiting for more facts to come up before you perhaps come up with a conclusion yourself. Let's say a person is thinking about a very, very complex situation or a story or what's on the news, etc. Thinking is when you observe everything that's said and done, and then you still think about all the factors that played upon, contributing to the story, and currently you're thinking, hey, is this true or not? Who was in it? Who was not in it? The person who's thinking keep asking themselves questions. They're continuing this train of thoughts and understanding that it should be anticipated that more information can come out before coming to a possible conclusion. But thinking is more superior because it doesn't discount the future facts. And judging is like you make sure it's like, okay, what happened in the past? It's okay, what happened leading up to the event, all right? And then it's like, okay, so what happened before all the data that were analyzed by scientists, etc., right? Like, for example, just to be concrete, global warming. Like, people who are judging, they might say, hey, it does exist, it's a real problem. And they could also go another way, saying, okay, it may not be real, blah, 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 for whatever reason. But they're always using facts before and during today. But thinking is like, it can still lean more towards like either, like, oh, it's fake, or it could be real. I personally think it's real. And it's very important, like we solve this. But thinking is when we lean more to one side or another, but in our subconscious, we sort of think to ourselves like, hey, this is a serious issue, but I'm still kind of waiting for more information, or maybe I can go and investigate it. And that's what really thinking is. And I really believe thinking is more superior because ultimately, as long as there's a timeline and you're still waiting for more information to come, whoever's thinking instead of judging is on the right path of like going closer to the truth because more data will come out. And so with more data, there's more validity in whatever possible conclusion in the future. And so that's why thinking is far, far more superior than that of judging. And judging and thinking, this is the thing. I feel to train yourself to be able to, not that I don't believe you're incapable of thinking, but thinking is trained through constant questions. Even though you know lots of facts, you keep asking yourself different questions and angling the questions, right? Like another example is does God exist? And then you could ask yourself why many people think he exists, why many people think he doesn't exist. What are these stories like in the Bible? Like, are they from prophets? When did they live? Did God visit every single prophet? You keep asking yourself, right? Global warming. Is the temperature rising? If so, where? Is there other places that are actually cooling down? How come global warming is a huge problem? What is the consequence of it? Did the NASA saw something? Or are these people like traveling around the world to collect these data? You keep asking yourself more and more questions despite many answers you already know. And so you try your best, right, to come up with a conclusion, but the more information the person has, the better that person can actually come up with a proper answer or like valid, conclusion, right? So it's like science, like, how like science lab, it's like you do judge, right? Like for example, science lab homework at school, you collect data, you test what's the correlation between the independent variable and the dependent variable and come up with a conclusion. That's only based off of the scientific experiment that you carried out at school. But I'm not saying that's less superior. In science reports, the word conclusion is pretty valid. It's only based off of the data that was manipulated during the lab experiment, right? So when you judge it, you're like, okay, it went well, it didn't went well, right? And so maybe you could have done better. You evaluate the testing process to be not as good, so you can improve it next time, right? But whatever it is, that's the conclusion is based off of all the data you've manipulated and gathered, more like gathered, right? And so if that's the case, right? So there's a conclusion, and then you sort of like, okay, you think about it, right? And then here's the thing. I don't think conclusion section of a science lab report at school is really judging, because it never said in the science report lab that you wrote in school, it never said that this is the definitive conclusion. It just says conclusion. So like, as the discipline of science goes, the more data, the better. And as long as in science lab there's the teacher explains like, hey, reflect upon the science report you did, and then you evaluate, knowing that, hey, there could be a future scenario in which you really have to like redo the experiment but make it better to decipher the truth. And so technically speaking, the conclusion isn't really judgmental, right? It's not like, oh, this person judging, like, oh, there's no explicit saying in any science lab report saying, hey, the conclusion is the definitive end. So as long as that's said, it's more of a phase of a thinking process for me. So this is what I really think about, like the difference between thinking and judging. And so I personally think like I'm not totally, outside the trap of judging. Sometimes I do judge on a very subconscious level, like looking at people first impressions, and based on their first impression, I draw a conclusion about them. I'm judging them. But then my judgment may change if I pay close attention and ask myself, hey, is this person really like this, like on the first day, or not, right? So that's like when I really think. And thinking is really wise thing to do. But don't get me wrong, there's nothing 100% wrong about judging. It can increase the critical thinking. But I just sincerely believe that thinking is more superior than judging, as I explained. And I hope this sort of enlightened you. And if it did, please let me know feedback. And I hope you enjoyed it. And wow, I came up with a good analogy. Global warming. That's something I very much interested to study and learn more about. And then I'll come up with my conclusion, and then keep changing my conclusion, keep asking myself questions. And since it's a very highly sensitive issue, I would further investigate it in the hopes of solving it. Thank you for hearing me out, and have a great day. Bye-bye.